Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gadfly. I'm your host, David Rich. We have the third appearance of one of my most favorite authors in Mundelein, um, Stacy Kade. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fabulous. I'm fabulous. So we were talking before the show, so we got some cool stuff to talk about. But I want to get to the main reason I asked you to come on the show and chat tonight is because you're somewhat recently your book Dead Silence was released about a month and a half ish ago, 2 months ago, something like that.
Yep. hmm
And I had read it, and I had you on. We talked about it, and I loved it. And I gave a copy to my friend, who last time I talked to her, she wasn't finished, but she was really into it. She was very much enjoying it. Uh,
Awesome.
I gave the other books that you gave me, the young authors or young people's whatever. Goth meets Ghost. What was it?
The Ghost and the Goth. Yeah.
There you go. I gave her all three of those books, and I haven't talked to her since. I don't know what's happening there, but I'm sure she's enjoying it. So yeah, and she might actually be watching tonight. I make sure that I
Awesome.
connected her with the show. So yeah, very cool. So welcome back, and I hope everything is well. Everything going well?
Everything is great. It's actually we're slowing down just a little bit from that rush of initial book promotion from the book coming out in February. So I have a chance to breathe and work on some new stuff, which is awesome. And still getting exciting reviews and news about the book all the time, which I love, and I'm so grateful to everybody for reading it and posting about it and telling people about it, because word of mouth is invaluable when it comes to books or really any kind of storytelling entertainment. Like if you hear, if you see an ad for it, you're like, well, maybe. But if your friend says, yes, this is really good, you're going to listen to that more. So it makes a big difference.
Makes a huge difference. We touched on that last time I had you on. We
hmm
talked about how, like, you have friends exchange books like all the time. Like, you've got to read, because if you're
Yes.
friends, you probably have X, Y, and Z in common.
Right.
And so, like, if and most of that has to do with entertainment, intellectual disposition, stuff like that. I mean, so yeah, that tends to be how you make friends. Not always. I mean, that's not an absolute formula or anything. But yeah, so I mean, my friends and I have passed around a lot of books over the years, quite a few.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was turned on by a friend's girlfriend back in the early '90s to Tom Robbins,
Oh,
and
sure.
I literally brought Tom Robbins to my group of friends up here. Um, and then several of them thanked me quite a bit because Tom Robbins is awesome. Anyway, yeah, no, it's very cool. I love that kind of thing. I love that. So okay, well, so how is it being received? You're saying there's some positive comments going on?
Yeah, I mean, well, so what's interesting, and this is anecdotal, so who knows, but it is really interesting to me, from the sort of long-term look at it from my as an author standpoint. On Goodreads, people add the book, which is amazing, and that helps because I think there's probably an algorithm. There's probably multiple algorithms involved in all of this. But my first book, The Ghost and the Goth, which you talked about earlier, has about, I think, like 44,000 people or something that signed up to read it at some
Oh,
point in
wow.
between when it was announced in 2008, 9 something, all the way up till now. But Dead Silence, which was much newer, is a very new baby relative to that, is already at almost 30,000. So I really feel
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah. So I mean, now who knows? I don't know, in terms of what that actually means, but I really do feel like that at least the word's getting out and getting out fairly quickly, which is exciting. And they did tell me, and I can't remember if we talked about this, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. They are doing a second print run, which is
Oh,
fantastic. So we're
already.
actually getting a second printing, which should be ready, I think, sometime in April. So anytime now, because there's a shortage. There wasn't quite enough printed to meet the demand, which is,
That's
I mean,
fabulous.
that's the place you want to be,
That's where
right?
there are worse problems in life. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So of course, with supply chain, it's taken a bit to get them back in, but yeah. So they're doing a second printing, and then they increased the amount of the second printing. So that's really great, and I'm thrilled. So I think, I'm kind of looking at sort of numbers. It's hard without context, but I really feel like it's the word's getting out. So I'm thrilled.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Good for you. That's great. Yeah, that's definitely a testament. I mean, that they have to increase the amount, and well, first of all, do a second edition so soon,
Yeah.
and then increase the amount thereof. That's very cool. That's very cool. Is there any sort of demographic charts you have? Like, is it selling a lot in the Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, Belgium? I mean, what?
Well, not Belgium. I can tell you that because we have the foreign rights are handled separately, but there are a couple countries that are, and we haven't signed contracts yet, so I can't talk about which countries, but we have sold rights in 2 other countries besides the United States. Well, I should say non-English speaking countries. So 2 other
So,
non-English
oh
speaking.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to be translated into another
Right.
language
Yes.
is a big deal.
Yeah, it's awesome. But that's all happening.
It's not
And
Russia, is it?
I am not talking about which countries it is or is not.
Maybe, maybe it'll get put into Putin something to think about other than killing.
Oh, you never know. It is, yeah. Who knows?
Oh yeah.
And I could, in terms of demographic information, I would be very curious about that. That is not included. So about twice a year, authors get royalty statements, and that is just kind of a general summary of the number of books that have sold since the last royalty statement or within that period. I think it's usually like April and October, but it may vary depending on publisher. I'm not actually sure. The number of copies sold, the breakdown in terms of hardcover, ebook, audiobook, paperback, whatever. So you get that kind of breakdown, but you don't have any kind of regional breakdown. But I think if I logged on to Amazon, they have like book scan, and I think they can tell you. I feel like I've looked at that before for one of my other books, and they can kind of say, through Amazon, we've sold X number in Minnesota this week.
Oh.
Because I remember when my first book came out, when The Ghost and the Goth came out, it was really interesting because the setting for that is the Midwest. I am from the Midwest. Logically, then most people I know are in the Midwest, right? It sold big time on both coasts and like kind of trickled in the middle. It was really
Really?
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I haven't looked at that yet, mainly because I try not to get too hooked into that because I can't control it. I can't control how well it's reaching Nevada. So I try not to worry because as my little author brain gets going, and I need to be
My
writing
little
books,
other brain.
you know?
That's funny. Um, yeah, I wonder if it has to do something with like a lot of bigger cities around the coast. So a lot more people, a lot more readers. That just like a general statistical
It
analysis.
it could be, or my thought was is you don't necessarily want to read what you know always. So maybe you want to read about a small town in the middle of nowhere Midwest if you are not living in a small town in the middle of nowhere Midwest.
Oh yeah.
If you're living in New York City and taking the subway to high school, maybe the idea of driving to school is kind of quaint. I don't know. I
Yeah,
thought,
for sure,
who
for sure.
knows?
Yeah, yeah. Who knows exactly? That's really interesting, and I mean, I study a little bit of statistics. I'm always interested in that kind of stuff, just how, just population distributions and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
they sometimes they're meaningful, sometimes they're not. So got to be careful with statistics. They're not. You don't go to statistics for truth. But anyway, well, that's very cool. So tell me about the book signings. What is that like? Do you enjoy it? Is it annoying? Is it both?
Well, it's been different this year because we're still in the midst of COVID. So I have been doing more online events, which is actually wonderful because obviously, whenever you're doing in-person events, and I've done a number of those over the years, that depends on budget, that depends on timing, it depends on a lot of things, what the publisher is willing to do. Like, when you go to a bookstore or when you go to a conference, most of the time that's the publisher paying to go. Like, they can request you, but then the publisher ends up paying a portion or all of your way to get there, your hotel room, all of that. So as publishing budgets have decreased, then you're not going as many places. But the one, I suppose, upside, if we're going to look at it that way, of COVID is that more online events, more accessibility for people who couldn't maybe fly to come see you or whatever. And just, I feel like that people are more comfortable now with Zoom and that sort of thing. So it's not such a big deal to be like, oh, I really want to go to the bookstore for this, but I guess I'll, log onto my computer. It's just, that's what we do now, which there's good things and bad things about that. So there's been a lot of those I've done. Nightfire is fantastic. They have a fantastic team and they organize several signings around the release. And it was really easy. I just signed book plates and sent them to the bookstore, and then the bookstore had the books. And if you wanted the books, you went to the store; they would ship them to you. So there's a lot of really cool things. I've done Read Between the Lines in Woodstock. Do you know it?
Oh yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
They're fantastic.
I love
And
Woodstock. I want to live there. You were out there?
oh yeah, so
Oh man.
Becky, or not Becky, wow, Arlene. Sorry, I was going Andersons and I my wrong name substituted. Arlene, who's fantastic, she has worked out, like, so if you go online to read between the lines and you want a signed copy of Dead Silence, they'll take the order and then they call me and I go and sign it or personalize it to whoever, and then they ship it out, which is amazing. So I have gone now since the book has been out. I think I've been over there 3 or 4 times because they just keep calling, going, we have more orders, we have more orders, which is amazing. And that's a different kind of signing. Again, part of COVID, because we're not jamming 30 people into a room. So,
Right.
it's been interesting.
Oh, that's very cool. Did you have a good turnout?
We have, the only one that I've done where we've had a bunch of people in the room together was at the Barnes and Noble in Algonquin, the new one, and it was wonderful because it was what? I'm sorry.
In Algonquin, where? Algonquin.
It's new. It's in Algonquin Commons.
Oh, okay, I know where that is.
So, do you know where the Half Price Books is in Algonquin?
No, but I know where the Commons is.
Okay, so it's like, yeah, it's part of that whole thing.
Okay. All right, cool.
So this is the whole thing. They were in Crystal Lake, that store shut down, then everybody there went to Spring Hill. Spring Hill closed, and now they're over at Algonquin. And I used to work at the Barnes and Noble in Crystal Lake. So going to a signing there.
Of course you did.
Was okay, yes. So going to a signing at Algonquin Commons was really cool because it was my friends were on staff. We had a great turnout. I mean, we had like 19 or 20 people, which is fantastic for a middle of the Saturday for a new book and an author that people don't really know. So it was a fantastic experience. I loved it.
That's great. Any Barnes and Nobles closer by, like in Vernon Hills or anything, that you're going to be doing signings?
What's really funny is I had emailed them and been like, hey, I work over at the high school nearby. I think when this book comes out, if people are interested, they're going to come to you because you're the closest bookstore. And I'd love to sign some books for you or do whatever. And like radio silence. And then somehow I think the manager that I know I don't know, somehow someone talked to someone and they were like, oh, we wish you would come and do a signing. And I'm like, I tried.
Well, it's not too late, is it?
No, it's not. I just need to follow up with them.
Yeah, okay, yeah, for sure. That would be great.
I stopped by there and signed books. So they have signed stock. I just haven't done a signing. I haven't done an event there yet.
Right. Oh, so you just went by, took them off the shelf, signed them.
I do that. I any bookstore that I pass, if I'm not in a rush to something else, I will go in and say, is it okay? This is who I am. Is it okay if I sign stock? Because signed stock sells better.
I don't have the books in my office on my bookshelf. Is your picture on the back?
It is.
Okay, so they know that you can be like, this is me.
I have had books though where my picture wasn't, and I was waiting. I was waiting for them to be like,
no, like, I mean, because you go by a pseudonym. I mean,
I do, so it's not even like I can be like, here's my driver's license.
Yeah, I can't do that.
I did have somebody once ask me for that, and I've never written under my real name, but I think it was and this is how long ago it was. I think it was a Borders. And it was a Borders somewhere. And I was like, hey, this is my book. Can I sign it? And they're like, do you have ID? And I was like, well, and that one happened to have my picture. I'm like, this is me, holding it up next to my face. They're like,
that's
okay.
Awesome. Do you have ID, please? That's funny. I remember Borders. Yeah, Borders. I always liked Borders better than Barnes and Noble. They just had a better philosophy section. But anyway, I haven't even been to the new one in Vernon Hills. Have you been there?
I have, yeah, a few times. It's really nice over there. You know what? It's one of those things. I'm kind of partial to a certain vibe in a bookstore, and I think it's from growing up. When I was a kid, we would go to a used bookstore, and there are piles of books everywhere, and it's kind of like old paper smelling and dusty, and whatever. And this is such a weird complaint to have, but the Vernon Hills bookstore is beautiful, and so is the Algonquin one. They're pristine though, and you kind of go, oh, like they,
for sure.
it's just a different vibe. The one in Crystal Lake, when I worked there, it was, granted, it's a bookstore. It was, of course, clean as it could be made, but people spilled coffee on the carpet, and you knew not to sit in that chair because the leg was wobbly, and like it had personality. Whenever you've got a bookstore that's really brand new and is just spotless, which is what you're aiming for, I'm sure, it's kind of like, okay, it's fine, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's, like the one you're describing, the used bookstores with the piles everywhere, I mean, that just has a greater, probably has a more interesting story to it than a pristine corporate run, bookstore.
Well, and I mean, I have to speak up. I love the Barnes and Nobles. They have done a great job. They've got that, I think, the new CEO in there who's giving them more power, because it used to be like some random person in a tri-state area would do all the ordering for all the stores, and it was really hard because then it was like, you know, Crystal Lake, which was my store at the time, knew, hey, we sell more thrillers than anything else. We need more thrillers, and it was like, nope, you don't get the thriller. You get this literary fiction that somebody in Milwaukee thinks that you're whatever, you know what I mean? So now I think they're
Well,
trying to go back to away from centralized ordering and more into letting the stores have more control over what they bring in, because that's how you get, that's how you personalize. They're trying to personalize a little bit more, I think.
that's good. That's how it should be. People obviously enjoy that more. Yeah, that kind of like distant, abstract corporate entity that doesn't have any like real understanding of like localities and stuff like that. Is yeah, that's one of
Yeah,
the
it
it's one of
we,
the
we
aspects
need
of corporations we don't like.
you need to have a local personality. You need to have a local flavor. Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting, and I'm surprised actually that these things are still going with everything being online and Amazon and everything. I mean, Amazon started off as a book selling site, and now it sells everything in the world.
It does. Yeah.
you know, but
Well, I think that, Amazon, I have complicated feelings about Amazon, but I will say that
I do too.
it is really hard to browse on Amazon. If you know what you want and you want to get it at a certain price or whatever, that's probably the fastest way to do it. But if you're like, I have an hour to kill before I have to be somewhere, and I love bookstores and I want to wander around and touch covers, you can't do that on Amazon. And I've found, I'm sure you have too. I've found hidden gems, at things that I'd never heard of or things that I never would have picked up because, I walked through the shelves. And I feel like that's why we need to keep bookstores, because you're going to lose that joy of discovery if we're doing all our ordering online.
Absolutely. And like going back to Amazon, like the Kindle experience. And I have a Kindle app. I have my Amazon Fire tablet, and I had a regular Paperwhite Kindle thing. But and I have a lot of books on my Kindle. There's no doubt. And I think there's something very cool about the fact that I have like 1,000 books in this little thing right here. That's
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
But there's something about the tactile experience of reading that every once in a while I've got to buy a real physical made of
Mhm.
paper. I just finished one. It's actually in my car right now because I just finished it last night while I was out. Um, and there's something with just the turning of the page and just the feel of the book that adds to the experience and the joy of reading for sure. Uh,
I 100% agree with that. I am, if I can get it in paper, that's what I prefer. There's not even a question about that. I mean, it's the tactile, as you said, it's the smell of the paper and the ink, it's the
uh,
weight of it, in your hands. And I think it's hard to not be distracted when you're reading. I read on my phone. I have the Kindle app as well, and easy though, like, to be like, oh, I'll just check my email. Oh, and I'm
no,
interrupting
that's true.
myself.
That's true. Or you get a text or something else, and you get lost in a text message conversation, whatever. There's
Yeah,
no doubt. There's no doubt. Or a
but
notification or something
to
else.
your point, it's super convenient. I mean, it's so super convenient. I do, but I read an interesting study that talks about the way that our memory works. I don't know if you find this, but I do think it's true. I don't remember the ebooks as well as I remember the ones I read in print. Like, I can tell you, like, if I'm thinking of a specific line, I can kind of picture, well, it was on the lower half of this page, like it was on this side of the page and it was lower down, and I can kind of think of where it was, and that's because we remember things, I guess, like visually, spatially.
Sure.
Whereas when you're scrolling, you don't have that. It's there somewhere, you read it, but you don't have the same.
That's interesting. I don't know. I've never really thought about that. If I remember more from a real physical books or digital, but the spatial thing is very true of memory.
Mhm.
Um, and with like so, sometimes I'll read, I'm reading a book on this, and then sometimes I'll be reading the same book on this.
Yeah,
So the spatial is different.
sure.
So I guess so might be confusing my memory. I don't know. I'll have to think about that.
Well,
Um,
it was in the context, I think, of studying, when they're talking about e-textbooks and textbooks, and when you remember things for a test, that part of memory is remembering it, where it was on the page.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. I just
There was a thing. Well, I got my philosophy degree from Portland State University out in Oregon, and I remember taking a psych class, and the teacher was talking about how there was one class. I don't know if it was a psychology class or not. Or anyway, the students went through the whole term in this classroom, but took the final in a different classroom, and like tons of people bombed it. And the psychologist is like, you can't do that. You can't take them away from like a 16-week learning area to another one to take the test because of state dependency in memory and education learning.
that's so
So like
interesting.
now it became like a university rule that wherever you had your class, you have to be able to take the midterm and final in that same room.
I
Is
remember
that
reading
crazy?
that is completely fascinating.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something I read once, and I don't remember where. But they gave it was advice like if you're studying for a test and taking notes with a pen or a pencil, or you have a pen or a pencil you've been using for that whole class, that entire semester, whatever, they want you to take the test with that same pencil, that same pen, because you have written the answers. It's a but it's so interesting. And it
Memory is good. Memory comes a lot in part from conditioning, from familiarity,
mhm.
that kind of thing. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So
It's weird. It doesn't matter.
well,
The
it is
pencil
weird because
doesn't know the answers.
you think you would just remember. Oh, this is the
Yeah.
statement. Remember it. Okay, move on. That's memory is a little more delicate than that. All right, kids. That was the educational portion of the show.
Sorry,
Um,
sorry, sorry. I
no,
love
no,
the
no, no. This is
yes,
that's okay. This all has to do with writing and reading and
it
educating and
does.
learning
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. No, that's actually very interesting and important stuff. How your memory works, and there are books and books and books on, the peg system and mnemonics and stuff like that. And I read books about this a long time ago, and to this day, if I feel like I'm having a trouble memorizing something, I'll make an exaggerated picture out of like the points I need to remember, and I never ever ever forget it. It's fantastic. I
You're
mean,
making me
generally
want to
speaking,
do
my memory's maybe a little bit above average. Not, I mean, I don't have like a super memory or anything, but
you're making me want to do research on this because I've
it's
always
cool.
been fascinated into
Memory's cool.
memory and huh?
Memory is cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, no, it's good stuff, for sure. Did you ever watch the show Taxi?
I've seen episodes, but not well enough to know it. Like I know it has Danny DeVito in it and
Yeah,
Christopher Doc Brown. I can't think of his real
yeah,
name.
him,
Lloyd something. Lloyd Brown, Doctor no, Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher
Christopher
Lloyd.
Lloyd. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
Did Mary Lou Henner, I think her name was the redhead. Do you remember her?
I
Right.
remember Bell
She's
Bottoms.
one of like 20 people in the world that has like a perfect memory.
Yeah.
Like she can't forget things. It's crazy.
There's I think we have her book at the library or
Oh,
something because it's like The Woman Who Can't Forget or
yeah,
something like
something
that.
like that. Yeah, yeah. So, and I saw an interview with a lady like that too, with just an intense eidetic memory that like it was torturous to her. Like she couldn't shut it down.
Well, because
So
you're
it's
not
not,
remembering important things, and probably the important things, if you treat everything the same, the important stuff gets lost. You know what I mean? I would think.
yeah, I guess there's some sort of like statistics that average people remember about like 14 major-ish events per year. Like Mary Lou Henner remembers like 300. That
Wow.
kind of thing. Like it's just totally off the charts. Anyway, okay,
Fascinating.
enough about memory. Okay, so those are the book signings. That's very cool, and I hope you can get one in Vernon Hills. That'd be awesome. And if you do, let me know. I want to go.
Will do.
Um, if you need, I can be your bodyguard or something. I don't
Okay, sounds good. I like it. It sounds like a good plan to me.
know. So you might have like some sort of disgruntled reader who didn't like the way it ended or something.
Always, always, always possible.
Which is okay because that means they got into the story. They got into it. It might have been not been their cup of tea, but they were engaged by it to a point where it pissed them off.
I always feel like that's that whole thing that, love isn't the opposite of hate or hate isn't the opposite of love. It's apathy.
Apathy.
If they read the whole thing and they're mad about it, mad enough to email you, which has happened to me, not with this book, not yet, knock on wood. Then you're like, well, I'm sorry that this didn't usually it's that it didn't go the way they wanted it to. And it's like, well, but that doesn't mean that I did it wrong. So,
Right. That's
it's just sort of interesting. But it's a
not a
win
math
because
problem. Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
and
for sure. For sure. And
if
we
they're
talked
really
a little
mean,
bit about that the last time about like, do you, as a reader and a writer, like, do you read other books and be like, I would have done this part differently, or I would have done that. Well, of course you do. I mean, remember I told you I got that from Prince. Whenever he would listen to music, he would
Yep.
like kind of like change it in his head to the way he would write it, that kind of thing. And he says like, not that the song doesn't have its own merit because these are great songs, but he's like, that's just how it goes. When you're a musician, this is what you do. You hear something, and I've done that before. I heard, well, I think I would change that chorus just a bit. So, but it's not my place to do that. So, yeah, no, that's very cool. Yeah, absolutely. Andy Kaufman, the deceased comedian who was Latka on Taxi, with
Sure.
the funny voice, he loved being booed. At least the audience is getting into it. He preferred laughter, but I
Sure.
mean, if you're, it's dead silence when a comedian has a problem. That
Right.
kind of thing. So,
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Even if you're getting there's a that's kind of the thing behind, for example, a banned book. All of those go, not that you want your book to be banned, obviously, and book banning is bad. I feel like I need to be very specific about this. But if your book is banned, authors are often like, okay, I'm going to see a sales spike, because you usually do. If only because someone's like, what's so bad about this book that it's been banned? I need to read it. Because we're all very much someone says, don't touch it, and we're like trying to find our way in,
yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure. Do you remember or are familiar with the PMRC situation in the 80s?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember exactly what PMRC is. Something about parents and music recording, something or other. Anyway,
Mm.
Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, was walking down the hallway in her house one day, and her son or daughter, teenage son or daughter, was listening to "Darling Nikki," the song by Prince, which is
Oh,
very, very sexual. And
I know
she's
that
like,
song. I know that song.
whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. So like literally, it went to Congress, and they had John Denver, Frank Zappa, Dee Schneider from Twisted Sister. I don't remember who else, but they all went there, and then because they wanted to basically censor heavy metal, hard rock musical CDs. And then, of course, the musicians are fighting to not have that happen. Well, the compromise was that they just put warning labels on the CDs.
Yeah.
This contains explicit lyrics that might not be suitable, blah, blah. Well, everybody's sales went through the roof because they couldn't stop the kids from buying them. The kid bought them, like, yeah, cool, I'm going to do this and like really rebel against my parents. Yeah, so it was like the best thing that happened in the music industry ever.
Well, because again, you tell people that it's like I'm in several groups of romance authors because I've written romance, and it's very funny because they'll talk about these people who will read the book and be like, oh, this is just smut. This is just blah blah blah. And then you've got like 27 things underneath it going, what's the title of the book? Where can I get it? So, what one person's 1 star is someone else's 5 star. And isn't that a good thing that we live in a world like that where everybody can find a book that works for them, and sometimes the one you hate is the one someone else will love.
Absolutely. And if you're going to charge after a piece of literature, make sure you know what you're talking about. I just watched a video interview of this guy who was talking to people at conservative political rallies and
Mhm.
saying about book banning and stuff. And like, well, there's this book out there that has a story of like 2 daughters getting their dad drunk and then having sex with them. They're like, oh my God. And they're like, shouldn't that be banned? And they're like, absolutely. He's like, yeah, it's the Bible.
Bible.
They're like, no, it's not. He's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Lots and so anyway, yeah, so make sure get your data straight first. Anyway,
Yes, I remember. I'm a pastor's kid over here, so
right,
I knew
right,
exactly where that was going.
yeah, exactly. um and not that the account I don't think is meant to condone that act. I think it's just
No,
something.
no, 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 no. It was about making a point that people, and this is true. I mean, they've done studies on this, and this is speaking more from the library side. Most of these people who will sign, even parents who will go against a school district. This is happening. We see this a lot in Texas. They're like, well, did you read the book? Well, no, I don't have to. I know it has this, this, and this in it. But did you read the book? You didn't read the book, so how can you know? Yeah. Yeah, so you should know what you're protesting against, know what you're yeah,
Wasn't the
know what
Catcher in the Rye a banned book?
it has been in the past. I don't know if it's been recently.
Like there's like really nothing in it that's controversial.
Not anymore, I don't think. Not really. Well,
Right.
our
Oh,
tastes are
right.
it changes. Our standards change. I mean, they just do. So, and then the thing is that people are kind of comfortable with whatever was okay whenever they were younger, and then that shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was, yeah, exactly. Okay, so all right, let's talk about. So, Dead Silence is being received very well.
Mhm.
Second printing coming up, which is very cool.
Yep.
Um, I have my first edition, which means that I can probably in about maybe what 5 6 years I can sell it for like a couple $10,000.
Sure.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. I think I gave the signed copy to my friend, so I might need you to sign mine, or maybe I
I would
kept. No, I don't remember which I did. Anyway, no, first editions are hot stuff. When an author becomes big, that's first editions are that's the cash cow there for sure.
It is, and you hope to one day be the person as an author, you're like, you hope to be the one person, somebody picks it up at a used bookstore and squeals because it's a first edition. Like you want to be, that would be awesome to be that person.
Yeah, I actually have a pre-released edition. Oh, well, I'm gonna be
You
rich.
do.
I'm gonna be
Yes, you
like
do.
a billionaire. Just because I own your pre-edition book. That's very cool. All right, so let's talk about what's going on now. Now that your book is out there, obviously it's a success. I mean, things are going well for you. What do you got? What are you working on? I mean, are you allowed to talk about it all? Like what's going on now?
I'm allowed to um
Are you working on another book?
I am. Well,
Okay.
I'm always working on another book, but yes, I am working on another book. I am working on something else that is science fiction horror. It will
Yay.
be set on a planet instead of on a ship, but it
Okay.
is still science fiction horror. And I don't think I can talk about much more than that.
When do you expect to have it done?
Um,
Or do we
the first draft is due in September.
How do you? Okay, that's interesting. Let's a nice jumping off point. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about author's relationship with the publisher,
Sure.
the publishing house, because I'm thinking of like all these nightmare stories, and again going back to Prince when he changed his name to a symbol, he did that because of the legalities of who owned the rights to the songs written by Prince was the Warner Brothers or whoever it was.
Right.
Um, and they said, okay, cool, I'll just change my name. So anything that I write from now on, you don't have ownership. It was brilliant. It was like simple and brilliant. God, I miss him. Anyway, so a week from tomorrow, I'll be playing an hour of Prince on my radio show because that'll be the anniversary of his passing. Anyway, um, there's all sorts of horror stories of like just relationships with the artist and the people with the money, the people that are going to getting the art out, whether it be music, actual drawings, paintings, and in this case, literature. What's your relationship like with your publishing house?
They're fantastic.
Okay,
I think publishing is a little different than the music industry, although I can't really speak to the music industry because I don't really know a whole lot about how that works.
sure.
Um, it- when you're working, I have been very fortunate to work with awesome people. Let me put that out there first of all. And I think typically, although not always, nothing is ever always. When you're working with a larger company, so when in publishing, that's the big five, which I will not be able to talk. HarperCollins, Random, Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, Macmillan, which is what by Dead Silence is published by Tor, Nightfire, which is part of Macmillan. It's all very complicated, but there's only like about five big ones, right? And they have contracts drawn up. There is like kind of like book contracts, and they vary by publisher. And then you have an agent who works on your behalf most of the time when you're dealing with a traditional publisher to go through and make sure that it is as advantageous to the author as it can be. I mean, it's a publishing contract. Obviously, they're putting out all the money and they're taking the financial risk to put the book out. So, it's never tipped completely in your direction because that would be completely unfair and completely unwise as a business practice. But,
Yeah.
so you have somebody to look out for your rights. I'm not saying that bad deals don't happen. And there are certainly, as the technology changes and people's sort of understanding of, like, for example, ebooks, when I first started publishing, ebooks existed, but they weren't really much of a thing. So there wasn't really a thing in there about, how many copies you have to sell for an ebook to be considered out of print. Because you, as an author, get your rights back when a book is considered out of print. Technically, an ebook, though, is never really out of print.
Yeah.
So when do I get my rights back? Do I ever
Interesting.
get my rights back? That kind of stuff. So as technology has changed, we've had to adapt to that. Also, self-publishing has had some influence on that. For example, when you publish through Amazon directly with the book that you've written, your royalty rate, like Amazon, I think takes a percentage of that. I'm just using them as an example. And you get a really good sized chunk of change back. Of course, you have to do all the marketing promotion and all that stuff yourself because you don't have a publisher working with you. But the more that people are making in ebooks, I think that affects the royalty rates in ebooks on the traditional side as well.
Interesting. Okay. And that's the kind of the business, the contractual part of it. But like, what about the deadline? You said like the first draft to do in September.
So
You know,
you
like yeah, go ahead. Like,
no,
like,
I mean,
what if you
I
get
can
to
I
the
can
point
only
in August? You're like, I'm not done. Okay.
well, in August, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to worry about it when it's not done. But you, for the most part, when you have, in my experience, you work with your agent and your editor to establish what you think is going to be a reasonable first draft due date based on when the book is going to come out in a schedule. So publishing publishes in like a seasonal schedule. So there's like winter 2023, summer 2023, whatever. And they have catalogs. And so when they buy a book, you're kind of given a spot in a catalog. So for example, I was in this past year, winter 2022. Now, if something had happened and I hadn't delivered my book on time, or the edits were like I turned in a terrible book and they had to like redo a whole bunch of stuff, then you could get bumped out of that schedule, which messes everything up.
Yeah.
So you try to work together. I mean, I really feel strongly, and again, this is just my experience, but I feel very strongly that if you can make that, this is a team effort. Everybody works on this together. I'm doing the writing, but there's a huge amount of work that goes into getting a book out that is not the writing part of it. So everybody works together. We pull together as a team. They won't give me a deadline that I don't think I can make. I won't agree to a deadline that I don't think I can make. I'm not saying that that's everybody's experience. Certainly, if you are an author with some huge franchise and they're like, we have to have this next book out by whatever, I mean, there may be more pressure, although George R. Martin doesn't seem to be bothered by it. So
Well, I need to get inside. I don't know if I want to get inside his head. Because that is just amazing. The man invented a world. It's like
he
George Lucas, and stuff like or J.R. Tolkien. I mean, they invented J.R. Tolkien invented
amazing.
languages.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
It
yeah,
it is phenomenal.
yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, everyone's experience is going to vary depending on who you're working with, depending on what your circumstances are. But I think it's really every person I have ever worked with in publishing, and I know I've been fortunate to work with a lot of brilliant and talented people. They have all been from the perspective of we want to make this book as the best it can be, and we want to get it out to people. So I think that's kind of, as long as you have a team of people working on that principle, it's fine. I'm positive. Actually, I know there are horror stories, but usually that happens when um, your editor who buys you is the person who champions you through the process. So they're the ones that goes to sales. They're the ones that go to marketing and go, this book is awesome. You need to, sell it to the bookstores. You need to sell, how, I don't even know honestly how all this part works, but the editor is the one who pushes that, the editor and their team. So if, for example, your editor leaves or your editor, gets switched over to some other thing or whatever, all of a sudden you're orphaned. It's called being orphaned, and it's not melodramatic. It's actually feels that way because then someone else is going to be sent in to sub, and you don't know if that person likes your book. Would they have even bought your book? And you're kind of like, it's you're like the stepmom sort of situation. They're coming in, they're like,
Right.
you know
Yeah.
so you don't know, so that can happen too, and then that is a difficult situation. But again, it all depends on the people involved. But I think publishing in general, I don't think people get into publishing. They certainly do not get into publishing for fame and riches. They get into publishing because they love books and love working with authors. So it's just about finding the right people, I think.
Which probably is not the same for the music industry. Probably they get into production to make a lot of money.
One would
You find,
assume.
if there's anybody who, any published music company that had prints made a lot of money.
Oh, I'm
You know,
sure they did. And
that kind of thing.
the starting salary, or I think the salary, and you most of the time keep in mind too, the people who work in publishing, the vast majority of them must live in New York. That's changed recently with COVID, but they live in New York and they're making maybe $35,000 a year. And you're talking about people who are
Publisher?
living, yeah, they're living in like closets
That's what I
in,
was gonna say. In New York City, that's like a rat hole.
right. Exactly.
I mean,
Well,
that's
I mean, I'm not kidding. My sister worked as I think an associate editor for one of the bigger companies, and yeah, I mean, it's tight, and you're working all the time. The people who
you're
do it,
doing it because you love it.
yep, yep.
Interesting. That's interesting. kind of, I mean, I feel bad for them really living in New York in those in squalor, but I mean that's a testament. I mean, that's refreshing to hear that people actually still take on jobs that they love, that because they love it, not to make $1 million.
It is, I mean, but it's full of complicating factors though, because part of that is, you're relying then you may need to have family members who can afford to help you. So there is an issue then where you're not getting a very diverse array of people in New York who are then not necessarily publishing the types of, it gets very complicated. It would be easier if the industry shifted so that they could live wherever they needed to live and be able to afford. I mean, $35,000 is way more in Peoria, Illinois than it is in Manhattan. It's still not a lot of money in Peoria either, but you could live on it if you had to. So
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a living wage if you're, if it's like just, first of all, if it's just you, for
right,
sure,
right.
but I mean, yeah, if you have a, second income and a couple of kids, you can probably pull it off.
Right.
Um,
So I do think there are ways around it. And I'm kind of hoping that that is another positive thing that we're going to see out of COVID is that people are going to realize, we've made it for 2 years doing this. Is there any really reason that we need to have everybody here every single day in the office, and then living on a wage that forces them to live with 6 other people and have a single burner stove? You know what I
I mean,
mean?
that's
Like,
very interesting. That'd be interesting to see what happens for sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. You told that you're working on this. So you ever felt pressured? Like, okay, you're like, okay, come on.
No, well, yes, but not because of anybody, because of me. So my first book came out, The Ghost and the Goth came out, and Disney Hyperion was my publisher at the time,
Oh,
and they sent us on this amazing book tour. It is the one and only book tour I've ever been sent on, and they don't really do it anymore because it's very expensive. And they
what's
sent,
a
I think,
book tour?
a book
Just to go
tour is,
around and and promote the book.
yeah, like
Okay.
literally they send you all over we were gone for like 10 days. There were 6 of
Weird.
us. And three of us did the West Coast and 3 of us did the East Coast. And I'm still friends with the people that I went with on my leg of the tour.
Yeah.
And we were in San Francisco, and
Good.
I can't even remember all the places that we went because it was just a blur, and it was constant, like in and out of O'Hare. I think we got stuck at O'Hare like 6 times because it's a hub between going across
Yeah,
the
it is.
country.
Yeah.
But it was an absolutely like amazing experience. But while I'm doing this, I have turned in the first draft of my second book, so the sequel to this book, which is the first book was very well received. And they're obviously sending me on this tour, they're spending a lot of money. I turned in a second book and got an edit letter back from my lovely editor, who was the kindest man. He's like, kind of basically, yeah, this is not working. So he gave me, he kind of like pointed out, like, where, because that's what they do in an edit letter, is they send you, this letter that says, I love these things. Here's where it's not working for me. Here's where you need to work on, that sort of thing. And editors don't typically say, add this phrase here to make this, like, they're not going to tell you how to fix it. They're just going to tell you what's not working.
Mhm.
So I started revising it, and then I realized I wanted to rewrite the whole thing. I didn't want to just fix what it was. I kind of realized I went in with it sort of with the wrong mindset. I was thinking of it, and I think this will make sense to you. I was thinking of it more like a movie sequel instead of episodic television.
Yes.
So I needed to lean more toward episodic television slightly, and less toward giant movie world things changing. Like, it needed to be a little, because people read a series because they like the series, not because it's completely different than the next book. So I decided to rewrite it. And so during the day, we're out doing, like, interviews and bookstore signings. And then at night, I'm furiously typing because this was due. I was due at the end of June. My book came out like on the 29th or something like that. I was leaving my job to work full time on July 2nd. And I think the book was due it was due July 1st. And I turned it in at 4 o'clock in the morning on July 2nd. And I'd stayed
Sounds
up
like
all night.
college.
Huh?
Sounds like college.
It was, well, I was writing like the last 40 pages, like in the middle of the night. And it was terrifying. But to this day, that's the one that I think is really, like, really tightly written. My editor came back and he's like, I don't have any changes.
Wow.
So,
Do
but
editors change a lot? You ever had the editor change something? You're like, no, put that back in there.
They don't really take things out, and you can
Just
always
punctuation and grammar and that kind of thing.
well, so they don't so there's a couple different kinds of editing. So you have substantive or story editing, and that is where an editor goes through. Sorry, I don't know if my Siri batteries are running down or what's happening. Sorry. So there's substantive editing. Siri is trying to talk for some reason. I don't know why here. So there's substantive editing, story editing, which is basically where they read it through and then they look at story structure, they look at character arc, they look at characterization. They're trying to make sure if the whole thing makes sense, right? So you may have somebody come back to you at that point and say, you have a plot hole, you have this, you have that. Then they'll go through and do a line edit where it's like, you are repeating yourself here because you're concerned that the reader's not getting it. You don't need this. So they'll go through and they'll cut out lines or whatever. You are always free as an author. You have the final say. You can say, no, I'm not deleting that character. No, I'm not doing this. The thing is, there's a couple things. First of all, if one person or multiple people, because usually multiple people have read it to gather this input, if multiple people are saying this is a problem, it's probably a problem.
Okay.
The second part of it is, I don't care if you love, love, love that line. If it's confusing, it's confusing. And then you also don't want to be known as that author who is like, I'm such a genius, I refuse to make any changes, because then you're a jerk and nobody wants to work with you. So if you really feel strongly, and I have, so in the series, the Ghost in the Goth series, it's about a girl who's dead and for various reasons, like doesn't go into the light. She's a ghost. And at the end, my editor was like, oh, well, she should go into the light at the end of the trilogy. That's the way that should work. I'm like, hi, it's a romance. You can't do that. You can't do that. So we had this whole discussion like back and forth about how it was going to work. And he's like, okay. And then later, like, I think probably a year later, he's like, I can't believe I was going to have you send her to the light. I can't believe that. So, yeah, but it's always a conversation. And you're always welcome to push back. You just don't want to be a jerk about it. And you really do want to try to see where they're coming from, because often, I mean, from writing anything, you're too close to it. Your brain fills in the gaps. You don't see that.
Yeah, no, I edited a lot of my friends' papers in college, but I would always ask somebody else to edit mine, 100%. Because you don't, or else when I go back over it myself, I'd see things. I'm like, how the hell did I miss that?
Well, right. Exactly. Some distance helps. But I will tell you this. So then after you've done all the substantive editing and they've done this, they pass it on to copy editing. Now, I've had some fantastic copy editors, and then I've had ones that have obviously wanted to rewrite my book to be what they think it should be. And that can include, like, I had someone who was correcting my dialogue to be grammatically correct, and we do not speak in grammatically correct sentences. It sounds very stilted and formal. And we got into an argument about whether a 17-year-old boy would say whom. And I was like, no, he wouldn't. It would not happen. So there have been a couple times in my career where I've had to say, look, this copy editor and I we're not meshing. This is not working. They're trying to take out my funny things. They're not understanding. It's just sometimes you get somebody you don't click with, and then you have to say something. But most of the time it's done in track changes. You can just say stet, which means leave it alone.
Stet.
Stet. And I don't remember, it's Latin, I think, but I don't remember what it just basically means don't do this.
Okay, interesting. Cool.
So for example, if somebody had taken out all my Oxford commas, and the one before the and, then I would go through and I would just circle that and write afterwards stet all Oxford commas, and then they would leave it alone. They would not take it out.
Okay, interesting. That's efficient.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. Yeah, that's kind of that would be frustrating, I think, to deal with a copy editor like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of any 17-year-old that I know. I don't know what adults that use the word whom properly. It's always who they confuse subject and object and that kind of thing, and that's fine, whatever. Like we don't speak that way.
No, we don't.
We shouldn't speak that way. I think the first time I had you on, we talked about Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, and how brilliant it was, like how she wrote it, like you could hear the nuances of the dialect. The way she just spelled it out and stuff. It was awesome. It was fantastic. I'm just thinking like a copy editor, like going through that and be like, no, you don't say y'all, you say you all, and stuff like that. And like just utterly destroying one of the greatest books in American literature.
Well, it all just depends. And sometimes their job is to catch mistakes and to make things clear. So they're doing their job. It's just sometimes there is just kind of a different view of it. And sometimes they don't. Like I said, I've had people who didn't get my sense of humor, and they're like, "I don't understand this," and I'm like, "You're not getting. It's a joke. You're not." Like I remember, I don't
I'll be
remember
like,
what line it
that's not
was,
funny.
but it was like, I was like, my editor is literally going, "It's like the guy Bender in Breakfast Club. Did you see that movie?" Like he's like writing out these explanatory notes and to the copy editor because they just weren't. Yeah. So but
That's
it's a process.
interesting.
And again,
That's
it's
a
everybody's doing their best.
Bender from Breakfast Club. That's that would be an interesting analogy. I don't know what it was, but that's cool. There's probably you probably get a lot of mileage out of Bender. So
I love Bender.
yeah, absolutely. I was Bender. So yeah, that's cool. I've been cultured since, but yes, I still wear the AC/DC t-shirt. Um, but okay, that's very cool. I mean, so I wanted to ask you, like, like advice you would give to like current writers.
Advice about publishing or advice about
Well,
writing?
let's say writing first. I mean, we talked before the show about second person, and just not that I want to talk about that necessarily, but I mean because it's just weird. But
It
there,
is.
there are there are like there's a spy. I could probably count on both hands, and nothing more than the amount of books written in second person, the entire history of the planet.
Yep.
So my point being is that, like, what would you advise to, like, just a typical type writer, somebody who wants to write a story, and does not trying to be like all sorts of like crazy weird.
I would say write the story that interests you. Don't worry about the market. Just write what entertains you. Write the book. And I think maybe I've said this before on here, and again, I apologize if I have, but there's a very famous writer, and I don't remember who it is. Possibly Toni Morrison, possibly Beverly Cleary. I can't remember. Says basically, if the book you're looking for isn't on the shelf, then you need to write it. And that's what I would want people to do. Like a lot of people go into this and think, oh, you know, Amish vampire fiction is really hot right now. I could write that. It's like, well, great, but only if
You
that's the
say
story.
Amish?
Amish vampire fiction. I was making.
Right.
Um, you
That's
know,
awesome. I'm
you
on
know,
it.
if you can do that, great. If you're interested in that, but tell the story you really want to read, because man, you're going to have to read this thing so many times, and you're going to hate it. I promise you, you're going to hate it at some point or multiple points in the process, and it needs to be something you really feel strongly about, or you're not going to make it, because writing is a lot of hard work. Even there are points where it's super fun, but also there are points where you're like, why did I ever agree to do this? Why did I ever think that I could do this? So write the story that really, really means something to you. Do not let the market dictate that whatever that is. Just write what story entertains you. Even if it's something you're like, this will never sell. I promise you, I've written at least 2 books that I thought would never sell. They're like, there's no way that someone's going to buy this, and both of those have sold. So other things that I've been like, oh, well, this will totally sell, have not sold. So you can't really,
Interesting. Okay.
judge.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to, like, put your finger on the pulse of any market. And so yeah, that's tough. So yeah, just do with what you're familiar with, what you love, the kind of story you want to, you know.
Yeah. Well, and because too, publishing runs at about an 18-month or 2 years behind. So what's really hot right now was bought 18 months or 2 years ago. So if you're writing something, because there are, let's use this as an example that I know off the top of my head, World War II historical fiction, which is currently saturating our shelves, they're probably sick of reading it because they've been reading nothing but since for the last 2 years. They're going to want something else entirely. So really don't let the market guide you, because odds are that trend is probably already a couple of years old.
That's very interesting. That's a good point. Let's talk about, what about like writing software? We're talking a little bit about that before the show
Sure.
started. What was the one you mentioned? But that's only for Apple.
It is. Well, actually, they might have a beta version for Word or for Windows. I'm not sure. Everyone that, like, all these people have done Scrivener. My whole life, I have always used Word, and I've, sometimes Google Docs, depending on what I was using. This book has been difficult because every book writes a little differently, and this one I have like sections and pieces all over the place. So I got Scrivener, which I think most writers are familiar with. You can get it as an app for your iPad. I've got it for my MacBook. And it's cool because it has like different ways of kind of breaking things down. So for example, if I have a sentence or two of something that I know this chapter's about, I can put that in there, even if I'm not writing that chapter right now. So I can kind of write that there and then keep going on to something else or come back to it or whatever. Yeah. It has clipboard functionality. It's just really nice. It is a lot. I had to watch the tutorial. I'm still not sure I know how to do all the things. But I'm trying it because I figure anything that makes writing easier, and I don't mean like it writes for you, but anything that makes you excited, like, okay, I can put this over here and that's not lost.
Yeah,
That's
no, that's actually very cool. One of the reasons why I want to get to talk about another software is Dabble. Is that what it's called?
Mhm,
Yeah, I have ideas all the time that like may or may not be in sequence with an idea I had before,
mhm.
and so I need to put it somewhere. And that would be a really great tool for at least just that, if not, and as well as other things. But yeah,
Yeah, because you can do, I mean, you could open multiple projects and just dump things in there. And so, for example, I might know, oh, I don't know how we get to this, but I know a dead body's going to turn up in chapter 4. So I can go to like a doc, I can create a document, call it chapter 4 and be like, dead body here, and then just keep going, or go back
right,
to
right,
wherever
right,
I.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's very cool.
Sometimes you just don't know. Every book, like I said, every book writes differently. I tend to be a linear writer, but I don't
Oh,
know.
really?
I'm finding it helpful. So I will go with whatever whatever is keeping me productive is what I'm going to do.
No, that's a good standard. You're a linear writer, so that's interesting because I don't. My guess, I don't know, but my guess is that most writers are not.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I do know that I tend to have more context in order to be able to write. So if somebody says, write this scene, it's in the middle of these other things, I have to kind of imagine in my head. Like I don't think I could ever, in film, they film things out of order.
Yeah.
I don't think my brain would let me do that.
Well, that's interesting. But so, like, let's say, I mean, do you literally start every book with the first page of chapter one?
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, do you have the ending in mind? Like,
I
how do you develop your story? Because a lot of people say that the hardest part of writing a story is the starting of the story. Like, how do I start this? I got like all sorts of ideas, but I mean, you're a linear writer, so maybe you can't identify with this. I think most people's in their minds, their ideas for like a single story are all jumbled up in their brain.
yeah.
Like, how do I get to the point where, like, the starting point where all the rest of this is going to unravel?
I
How?
have to well, so for me, I don't always know the exact ending. I know, is my main character gonna get what they want? That's what I'm are they gonna accomplish their goal? That's what I wanna know. Does the main character accomplish their goal? If it's a mystery, do they solve the crime? If it's a romance, do they end up together? Is it, whatever. That's I know in the end, like, oh, this is what's gonna happen. So I have a vague idea, even if I don't know exactly how we're gonna get there. For me, it's not only that I have to have the first page, I have to have the first line. I can't write. I can't keep going until I have the right opening line.
That's
Um,
really interesting because that's exactly what happened to me when I started this thing that I'm addressing several years ago. I came up with the first line of a story, and the
mhm,
rest of it just sort of like
yep.
again not in sequence, but like so many other ideas for the story concerning this one line from this one character, just like I don't know. So I wrote it down today again, and then I elaborated on the scene a little bit. I'm not going to tell you what the line is because you're a pastor's daughter, but um, yeah.
You read my book. I
Well, no, this I don't think you'd like this one, but anyway,
Okay,
guys,
fair enough.
another,
We'll
another time. Another time. So, so yeah, I mean, but you have the first line in mind, and the first chapter. Do you have the middle?
no.
Okay, 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 okay,
No.
so, okay, okay, okay.
No, so what happens is, and this is what I do when I teach writing online. I sometimes teach writing classes, and this is what I tell people: like when you're starting a book, you need to start on the day as close as possible to the day that's different to the moment where everything changes. But you do have to start a little before that. In other words, this is the example that I give the kids when I'm talking about this in creative writing. You have a woman who's in her house and she's running around getting ready for work and she's running late. Like this is nothing abnormal. You can tell because she's like, I can't find my keys again. Damn it. Getting her cell phone charger and getting all this stuff together. And you get the context that she's going to be in trouble if she's late. She needs this job because she has, let's say, a sick kid or whatever bill she has to pay. So there's some tension there, some urgency, but nothing's really unusual yet, right? So she's finally gets all her stuff together. She's got her lunch. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. She opens the door to her garage. The car is gone, and there's a dead body wrapped in a tarp on the garage instead, on the garage floor
Naturally,
instead.
of course.
So that's the moment that her world changes, right?
Yes.
So if I'd started with her opening the garage, open the door of the garage, and oh, there's a body, there's no car, we don't get the context. We don't understand what's going on in her life. We don't understand that, maybe she's a mafia hitman. Maybe there's always a dead body in her garage. We don't know what her normal is until it's subverted. So that's what you're looking for, is that moment of change, right? So the beginning of the story has to be either right exactly at that moment of change or just slightly before it, so that we get that context of the ordinary world.
That's really interesting. Okay, very, very cool. Yeah, because there's that point in the story where the story begins, if you will. Like there's sort
Right.
of like the build up, and then like something happens, and then the rest of the story is about dealing with that situation.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah. Um, do you write in archetypes at all?
I'm aware of them. I don't really focus on it.
Okay.
So I don't really think about that. I mean, archetypes, I do. I'm sure you probably know the writer's journey or the hero's journey. Yeah. So I mean, that's that ordinary world stuff. So I really rely more on story structure. Characters are something I I don't know. I don't know. I don't really know where they come from. They just sort of show up and start talking. But
Okay, interesting. Um, uh, but you said before that you draw some of your characters from actors.
I draw the way they look from
Oh, but that's
actors.
right. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So not
Well,
their
that's right. The main
personalities.
character in Dead Silence turned out to be this hot blonde.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, that's her. Um,
Who was it?
huh?
What was the actress's name?
Eliza Taylor.
Eliza Taylor. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Eliza Taylor.
Cute.
Who was married to her on-screen love interest from that show, and they just had a baby,
Oh,
which is awesome.
that's cute.
Well, because we rooted for them as fans of that show, we rooted for them to get together, and the showrunner was like, "No, this is not a romance," and we're like, "Yes, it is." And then, like, I think they killed him. I stopped watching. They like killed him off, or something happened. I don't remember. And then they got married in real life, and we're like, "Ha ha!" Anyway, neither here nor there, but shows you when I get obsessed over people, then so I tend to incorporate them into a book, not who they are because I don't know them, but just what they look like. So, yeah.
Okay, so all right, we're a little bit past an hour, which
Oh,
is fine. This is fine. It's not like we're not on TV. I mean, this can be technically as long as we want. I tell people an hour, so I don't want to like upset them. Um, so give me your like classical literature. Give me a good one, like a book that but not necessarily your favorite, but one that stands out that you say, if you're gonna write a book ever, you should read this book.
oh no.
Oh yeah.
See, no, because it varies. It depends on what you're trying to write. You need to read in the genre or type that you're writing. So like I can't tell you Jane
Okay,
Austen
so
and you're not,
I know
you
you
know,
love Jane Austen, but I mean, okay, so then science fiction, classical, like would you Jules Verne?
I haven't ever read Jules Verne.
What? 20,000 Leagues Under the
No.
Sea. Okay.
I avoided all classics. You need to understand. I read some
Oh, okay.
Asimov, Ray Bradbury.
Oh well, Isaac Asimov. Have you seen the movie? Oh crap. Keep talking.
I can't think of. I'm trying to think who else I've read in. I see, and I read a lot of Star Trek. The novels,
Oh,
like
okay.
the series, like the Vulcan Academy and the DC Fontana and Jean. I cannot think of her last name. So I read a lot of those books, and all the some of the extended universe Star Wars stuff that doesn't count anymore. Apparently, I have strong feelings about a lot of things Star
About the
Wars.
new one?
About the newest movies? You mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, They should not have killed off Ben Solo. Like that whole thing made me really angry.
Okay.
But I am also like super into like Ray and Kylo Ren and Ben and all that stuff. So, romance person at heart. Um, and I'm trying to think of other classic sci-fi. I mean, yeah, I that's the kind of stuff I read. I read a lot of horror stuff like Christopher Pike and when I was a kid. And a
Did you get
lot of
into Philip Dick?
I'm sorry?
Philip Dick?
I haven't. I think I've read one of his short stories, but I know
Oh, because he's like the king of sci-fi.
Oh yeah, sure. Minority Report comes from his, and Blade Runner, and
Endgame and Blade Runner,
Mhm.
and yeah, no, he's okay.
Yeah, Fantastic. So I've read some of those things, but also you have to consider, and this is me standing on my soapbox a little bit, the vast majority of people that we praise in terms of the classics tend to not be awesome about writing active female protagonists who are
That's
not
true. We
just
discussed that before as well. You're right. I mean, the whole like trek into like equality and stuff like that in multiple areas of life is actually pretty new. So
it
like
is.
anything like before 1950 is like it's all just
No. No. And that doesn't mean I'm not saying there's not value in knowing all of those things, but I do think it is, it is frustrating to, all of us want to be the captain, right? We all want to be the captain. Nobody wants to be necessarily the sort of, blonde in the ensign in the short skirt, and that is all you know about her. And I think that's one of my things with reading some of that stuff is I'm looking for newer takes on things like that. I did love The Last Astronaut by David. I'm blanking on his last name right now. Ellington, I think. Ooh, this is terrible. He gave me an amazing blurb for Dead Silence, but I don't have his name right in front of me, and it's 8 o'clock at night. My brain is just going squish.
yeah.
He wrote a fantastic. I loved this because it was about a commander who had she was going to Mars and one of her people died on her watch and it haunted her, but it made her the more interesting character. There's several of them I'd have to look back that I've read that have been really interesting with women in lead roles in sci-fi, and I'm hoping that that's just starting. Like I'm hoping that's even going to blossom further because I want all of us to be able to picture ourselves in some kind of significant role that is not the blonde ensign in the short skirt.
The blonde ensign in the short skirt, right? Of course.
Yeah.
And do you think Star Trek the 60s show did a good job of? I mean, they had a lot of short skirts, but I mean, there was an emphasis on female.
Oh, I think I think it was revolutionary for the time that it was. Absolutely 100%. I don't think we'd be where we are today if it hadn't been what it was. I mean, and that was one of those shows I think that was championed, I think, by Lucille Ball. I mean, science fiction definitely has had women. We've just always been in the background. I think there's been a lot of that. I mean, I love Roddenberry, Majel Roddenberry's story, Majel Barrett Roddenberry, who, she was Nurse Chapel and she was, then she was Loxana Troy, and now she's the voice of the computer forever. I mean, there's just been some really cool stuff that has happened. And I think definitely Star Trek was, leading edge on all of that. I just think we can't stop where we were in the 60s. We need to keep moving. Keep going forward.
Absolutely. We got a long way to go. Do you think Star Wars accomplished anything like that? Star Wars is very archetypal.
It is very archetypal, and I think they did.
Lucas set out to even try to attempt to be like, besides
feminism. Like that. So I will say this. I actually just wrote an article about this because I love Princess Leia. Like I grew up.
Princess Leia was a badass.
Oh, she totally was. Yeah. And I think she's magnificent. And I think she's exactly what we needed and exactly what we still need today. However, what I'm hoping for, and what I tried to do in Dead Silence and will try to do in any novels that I try to write in the future that have science fiction elements or, that genre, I want a reflection of who we are. In other words, Princess Leia is magnificent and she's a badass and she fires the gun with the boys and doesn't hesitate and whatever. But I also want the people who are, we have our anti-heroes, our messed up, male characters, where I want the women who are flawed as well. I don't want us to be always that perfect, because that's as amazing as that is, that's not as relatable. She
kissed her brother.
She did. That's not relatable either, frankly. So
no, I mean that's
that's George Lucas.
Everybody's wondering, like, did Lucas not really write the part where they were brother and sister at that point?
Haven't you? Oh my gosh, I've done all this, like read all this stuff about it. Like he had no idea when he started out. There were the twins were together. There was this back. He retconned that whole thing. He like figured out where he wanted to go and then worked backwards and then kind of inconsistent. He just like sort of hand waved the inconsistencies. That's fine. The man is brilliant and made a cajillion dollars, and we all love it. But it doesn't mean that it's
And he gave us Star Wars.
He gave us Star Wars, which
which is just
right.
Joseph Campbell, the mythologists call it the
Right.
first American myth.
Yes. Yeah. I have. I'm
Because
like. I'm right here. I'm looking at. I have the writer's journey, which is Chris Vogler's take on the hero's journey from Campbell, and he
neat.
recites Star Wars. Yeah, I've relied on that heavily in terms of story structure and understanding story, because I think especially as a reader, any of us who are big readers, we understand story intuitively. But when you go to write a story, you have to have a more hands-on, crafty sort of understanding of story versus that sort of gut feel of it. You have to have kind of both. If you don't know what story structure is, if you don't know how it should work, you're kind of missing it. It's sort of like, I know what it feels like when the car goes, but I don't know how to make the car go.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's very cool. That's very cool. No, yeah, Lucas did a nice job, for sure. So, okay, well, any last words?
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I
Thank
feel
you.
like
I
we have
always love talking to you. This is great.
covered a breadth of topics. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. We were talking before the show that we didn't really have any plan. We just sort of like, okay, here we go, and here we are, like an hour later. Like it went by so fast. We're at an hour and 10 already.
Fantastic.
And I could keep going, but it's getting late. My brain is squished too. We'll just have to have you back on and talk some more.
Absolutely, whenever you want.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Stacy Kade, author of Dead Silence. Let's put that up one more time. Everybody, check out this book. It is very, very cool. It is very cool. The characters are cool. It is written in the first person, which is, I think, something as a reader you're not. It doesn't happen very often, and you did a really nice job with that for sure. Like at first, I was like the first like 2 pages. I'm like, is this first person or is she going to switch over here and like give me a general? Nope, first person. It was right because you really get into the mind, which is why you did it.
Yeah,
which is a very important part of the story. It was very well done. Very well done.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so Stacy Kade, author of Dead Silence. Thank you very much. Everybody, take care. Thanks for watching the Gadfly. See you next week. Bye.